This is what it is, okay? I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now, you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
And who looks like Waldo after he's suffered a layoff, a divorce, and failed suicide attempt? It's cold down here. I'm gonna assume that probably most of my viewers know what the double slit experiment is. If you don't, or you don't have an idea, this video is not really gonna make sense to you until you understand it. It'll only take about 15 minutes. So if you have no clue what I'm talking about, please stop the video and go look up the double slit experiment. I know I'm getting pretty creative with the editing, huh? So in the double slit experiment, we know that the particles they go through the double slit, and there's a million different or whatever. Maybe there is a finite amount, but we just see rows and rows and rows of different outcomes, basically wherever that atom would go, which would lead people to believe that they're particles in different worlds. But when it's viewed, here's the important part: when it knows that it's being observed, it picks one or the other. And this kind of goes back to the singularity thing, where there's behavior that I'm noticing in people where they sometimes don't know how to react when they realize that they're being observed. And these individuals' behavior is slightly different when they realize that they're being observed. Now this is going to tie into something that I bring up later, that has to do with the world. Just look, everything that I talk about on this channel, there's nothing what we would quote unquote normal about it, which that's probably more normal than we realize. They normalize the vague, mundane, everyday life, and teach us to believe that that's it, until this serpent-like spirit just strikes down on us from our own faults and weaknesses. And that's not me getting religious. It's just what I've seen from the build-up of everything around me, all the different experiences that I've talked about, and the different stuff going on at the Vatican and through the music and all that, and the satanic realm of it. There's a power structure that leads to serpent symbolism and just magical elements to all of this. And the world's changing. If you look at the Mandela effect, there are changes in the land masses. It's almost as if the Gulf of Mexico that I remember as a child has shrunk in on itself. It's as if it's like a flower when it starts to die. It's just way different. It's not vast. And the same thing with the Mediterranean Sea. It's just completely different. And I started to think, why are land masses changing in some areas, as if they're going away, and in other areas they're getting stronger, such as South America it's just kind of fatter and more plump than I remember it being, and with fewer countries. I can't remember the name of the countries, but I knew, studying for tests and stuff, and all the different names that we had to remember, that there's far less. Brazil's a lot bigger than it used to be, at least from what I remember. But I'm getting off track. I've just noticed a singularity in some of the stuff that I've been talking about, just like I was saying in the last video, where I would speak on something, and then immediately they would pump the brakes on whatever, on the people that were. The point that I'm making about the double slit experiment is that when the particles realized that they were being viewed, they reacted differently to the world around them. There were no longer many different variables, and they no longer did whatever they wanted to do. They either picked one or the other, say a positive or a negative, a right or a wrong, however you want to look at it. If we, I don't want to say quantify that, but if you magnify that, blow it up, and say those particles or those waves represent people, I'm seeing, there's people reacting differently to the way that I remember them as a child. Once the people realized that they were being observed, that I was on to whatever the scheme was, they reacted differently than what I would consider and what I would also feel it would be quote unquote natural. It's almost like a kid, when you're disciplining like a little baby, and you tell them don't touch that, and they look up at you and they're just like, it's there's always a positive and a negative reaction to something, and sometimes the negative reaction is willful, to whether it be test the boundaries or to confuse you, so that whatever this is trying to mold the clay. The clay doesn't belong to it, but it's still trying to mold the clay. So if it can give you a negative reaction from a certain subset or a certain group, and then you look towards the individuals that you have, things in common with, then that's how you divide the children of God that I'm talking about. That's how you separate them, and then, problem, solution, answer. Well, when the answer looks golden and there's a silver lining and all that, I mean, why wouldn't you flock to that and then slowly separate? Now you've got 100 people into 50 and 50, and then you see what I'm saying? So the crazy thing I can't wrap my head around is that some of these people I'm related to, some of them I've known all through my childhood, all that. There are certain singularities where some of these people I grew up. For instance, okay, I'll go back to, I wanted to talk about this today anyway. Madeline. I talked about knowing her when I was a little kid. I grew up on a road called Garden Drive. It was a horseshoe-shaped road. I lived kind of in the middle of it, not in the center where like the U was, but on the middle of the one line, and there was the other line over here if it was a shoe. And the kid's backyard, not hers, but the group of boys' backyard that butted up to mine was the little brother that I talked about that saw angels and stuff before he passed away. His family, he had another 2 brothers, and they were like my first group of friends when I was a little kid. I moved away, whatever. I was going to private school. I left, around 8th grade, went to another school, and lo and behold, one of the children that I'm getting on the bus with, enrolling in a different city on the same day, is one of those kids. Not the little brother, but the guy that later became one of my closest friends. We didn't know. We had one class together, that was it, barely talked. In high school, I'm going back to Hammond High, which was in a different, in the town that I actually grew up in. And lo and behold, who's enrolling in the school the same day from just moving back away from his divorced family member. Mine were divorced too. The singularities just boom, 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 boom. And then whose backyard butts up against mine? Basically. Not like it did when I was 4 years old. I was, 15, 16 at the time, so there was a little bit of walking distance, but it was relative. You follow me? And stuff like that just doesn't just by happenstance, there's no way that just happened. Now, because of everything that's happened, I think that's a part of that design that I'm talking about. Whether he is one of them, or he's someone that they keep trying to throw confusion at, so that because we don't hang out anymore. Some of that's my fault, some of it's his, but it's not for me to judge. It's either something that divided us, or he is one of them and got frustrated about something. I don't know. But Madeline grew up on that street too. I find it quite ironic that the name of it was Garden Drive. One of the first places that I remember growing up. Not the first, but the very first home that one of my parents had was on a road called Garden Drive. And it's just, I don't know, it's pretty crazy. This is going to kind of sound like I'm getting off topic again, but I've noticed, I watch a lot of YouTube. That's just pretty much what I do. And I've recommended some people before. I follow most of those people. There's some people that I haven't spoken about that introduced me to certain concepts that I never would have thought of. And some of them were about the Mandela effect, and some of them were, you know, the flat Earth guys, and then I started noticing they're getting into this defensive. This person's a shill, and this person's a shill, and I'm gonna expose this person. You're getting off. Bruce Lee said, he said, be like water. You pour water into the cup, it becomes the cup. You pour it into the bowl, it becomes the bowl. If all this stuff is shifting around us, you really have to be like that. And the reason I bring that up is, you know, I started to notice not only is it separating people again, you know, this person's this and all this fighting and all this, but then I began to see the agenda where this one specific person was talking about how, Horus and all this other stuff, you know, basically that Jesus was just a complete falsehood. There's no truth to it. There was one with the Mandela effect person. He was speaking about how to shift out of this reality and suggested that you blow your head off. He didn't say it in so many words. As a matter of fact, he left it open to hint at, but the point was, well, if you commit suicide, then you could just go. It doesn't, do not. You know, again, it's not for me to judge them and say, oh, well, this is one of those, this is one of those people that I'm talking about that's surrounding other people or disinformation agent. I don't know. Maybe he's confused. Pray for him. You know, you have to be above all else. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all this stuff just bounces off of you. But I just see something there. There may be a time when I say something that's just completely idiotic. You know. If God can work through us, then so can that serpent. So seek ye first the kingdom above everything else. But anyway, so this is something I've been wanting to talk about that I kept forgetting to, and it didn't seem right. And maybe today's thing is just going to seem like it's all over the place because the next story has nothing to do with it. But when I was a child, and I would lay in bed, I would see these lights, these perfect symmetrical patterns. They were just little dots, and they were of every color, but they were of the same color all at once. And what I mean by that is, if you can imagine a polka dot pattern, you know what I mean? But just all over, as far as my eyes could see. And I would be laying in bed, like looking up at the ceiling, and it would be just a wave of green. They would be moving, but they were perfectly spaced from each other. And sorry, I wasn't trying to. Anyway, they would be perfectly spaced from each other, and they would just move as if they were just a constant flow of them, and they would not really change distance or anything. They would just be up on the ceiling. It was as if I was seeing into a layer of another dimension through mine. It's kind of hard to, because they wouldn't conform to, like, let's say this roof, like, and then the glass here, you wouldn't see it like go up the glass and then onto the roof. It was just there. It was just flowing, and they would all change color all at once, and it would go from green to yellow, like then the yellow would come through, and then red and blue. It was just like every single color. And I remember laying there, and I was not confused about it being like a popcorn ceiling. A lot of this time we had like a tile ceiling, those old tiles from the 70s. But I asked a family member, and the way that they reacted was they kind of smiled, like they knew. They knew what it was or whatever I was seeing, but they just kept, They never really answered me, or, you know. And I remember bringing it up several times as a little boy, like, because I really understood how much they would probably think that my imagination was just getting to me, or that I was just playing or something. And I made a point to ask them several times, usually during nap time or whatever, and we were just sitting there just laying there as they were waiting on me to fall asleep, and I'm looking up at the ceiling, and I'm seeing all these patterns and lights just come through, and it really wouldn't interfere with anything. It was usually when I was calm, you know. It was always when I was like laying down. I wouldn't just see them, like I wouldn't be walking or going and playing outside or something like that and seeing it. It was always like right before nap time, and that happened a lot, and I'm talking at like 3 and 4 years old, you know. Anyway, I really, really want to know if that's happened to anybody else, if they remember that. That it just seemed odd to me, the way that those people reacted. And, again, I don't think I'm unique to any of this. So please, think back to whenever you were a little bitty. Anyway. Now, when I was talking about people acting slightly differently. There's a person in my life. One, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this now, because it seems that every time I bring something up, it's as if there's a reaction from my environment. As if, one, I said that I wasn't going to talk about this, but I don't know how to explain it. I've asked people, from church and people in my life and family to look at this stuff, and they don't care. It's as if they've already seen it. And that my entire environment knows about it, like, after I post it. Because none of them seem to be interested in anything. I'm talking faith-based people. One individual looked at it and then told me that I was focusing on the demonic too much. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to expose these things so that my brethren in Christ and in the Father can, I don't know. Anyway, there's a family member of mine that was a real headstrong police officer. They left the police department to go drive 18-wheelers. When they were driving 18-wheelers, they got really, really depressed. Like, they were just sad. They were saying they were away from family. They didn't like it, And I was okay. It's understandable. Now we're having a conversation the other day when they come over. I understand my family's they're distant and different from the way that they used to be. So they come over the other day and we're having a conversation about the next push after the transgender agenda is child molesters' rights. And this is a really, like, gung-ho, like, 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in the first ward, and like 2 in the second ward. So yeah, it was like 4, probably more than that. And very, very gung-ho, like, conservative type. And I'm like, what's this about? How this mayor and that mayor, you know what I mean? And it's, I'm trying not to come from a place of judgment, but their reaction was just not natural, and so they started going with the conservative view. That's Democrats for you, And I'm like, yeah, but no, it's not this or that. Again, problem solution. There's an answer there, but it didn't seem natural. Yes, it was natural to their viewpoints whenever I knew them a lot closely, but it didn't seem to strike, like, the reason I brought up the, he was a police officer, then he started driving 18-wheelers, and now he's a cop again, and he's a chief of police, but it is of a very small town, but he didn't run for that position. It was given to him. The chief of police died, and Homeland Security gave him the job. That's not normal. Anyway, it is of a small town, so maybe, it's just one of those towns that's so small. I don't know, maybe out west there's some people, I don't get out much, but it just, that's not normal to what I was raised into thinking. Now, the reason I mentioned the 18-wheeler thing is because he seemed very depressed, like I said. While he was on the road, sure, away from family and all that, he was driving across country. But it's as if, and this is completely speculative, I'm not saying this is fact, I'm just saying the way the person was reacting to the thing about rights for child molesters seemed very unnatural to me, as far as, oh, I just disagree with it, that's crap. Like, that's not the guy that I remember. Like, stand up, raising hell for the protection of the children. It's just not normal. And then the thing about how they got but again, it's speculative. However, the depression while driving the 18-wheeler really made me, I got to thinking about it. And I'm speculating. But there are interstates that run across country. There are railroads that run across country. And then there are tunnels that they use 18-wheelers for. We've seen that with the D.U.M.B tunnels, and that they go all over the place, and it just seemed, strange. I don't know, their reaction and just how sad and depressed they were while they were driving, after they worked so hard to get their what is it, Class E? I don't know what it is, but the 18-wheeler driver's license, and how quickly, You know, I mean, put in the time and the money and leaving the police department to go do this. Like, have you ever met a cop? Like, they usually don't pick something else. I understand when it takes a toll on family and stuff, you know, they see some horrible things, but he was excited about this. And then, you know, we're talking 2 months after getting the license and don't want to do it anymore. Oh, but look, this job just opened up. And the fact that it was of a very small town makes me wonder if the person, the chief of police that passed away, was not one of them. I don't know. Again, I'm speculating, but this all just seems so strange to me. It's artificial. It's not normal. And I'm noticing these things. And as I said, I notice as soon as I start to talk about something that hold on. Give me a second. Can you see that bird? I don't know if you can see it. Of course you can see it. He's right freaking there. Oh wait, he just jumped on the ground. He's trying to hide now. Now he's acting like a normal bird. And I'm gonna sound like a psychopath when I tell you a story about birds. But anyway, let's get back to the story. There's just something about it that seemed artificial. I keep looking at this bird. So anyway, so the bird thing, alright. Again, this is something I've kept to myself for quite some time because it just sounds nuts. And again, it was revealed to me during the some of the drug stages. But because of it, I can't change my mind. I can't unsee this. So one day when I'm still living at that trailer, I'm sitting out on the porch and I had done some drugs and this bird flies up and he sits, I mean, on the railing so close to me. Like the railing's right there. He knew that I was there. And he's just staring at me. He's just looking. And I know what you're thinking, and especially on the stimulant, you're like, bro, you're tweaking out. Like, you're so freaking paranoid. I know how ridiculous this sounds, but it wasn't the only time it happened. Again, spirit of addiction. This is all during that time where I'm not talking to God. I'm actually blaming him for everything and just keep doing the drugs, and he's so merciful. It's unbelievable. And so I do some more drugs again, and sure enough, another bird. It could have been the same one. I don't know. He fly, and his attention is focused on me. Like I don't. How can I clearly paint this picture? Like from a little bit further from me to the camera, as I'm sitting on the porch, smoking a cigarette. This bird flies up and lands on the railing, and he's just all his attention is diverted on me. And even when I'm looking at him and I'm studying him. And as I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and then he'll just with that eye, like I could just tell, like the dude's just, he's studying me. So after that, I'm like, I'll unsee it. And I go and I talk to that parent, and again, he got kind of agitated when I started talking about it. Again, it's just an unnatural reaction. And I didn't think anything, I didn't know what it meant, I started thinking about, well, angels have wings, and, if their whole world, who's to say that, I know that I've shaken hands with angels. Could they change form and I wouldn't even know it? That, they are watchers. But then I started noticing hawks and stuff, and they're not acting like what we would consider wild birds. They would almost strut in that yard. It was right behind a Sanderson Farm chicken factory. And these hawks would fly up and land in the squirrel's nest when the squirrels weren't there. And they would just stomp around and stuff. But their attention would be on me. And there was no reason for their attention to be on me. Again, I didn't think anything of it. I'm just like, why? You just acting like a bully. I could tell. Because they knew when the squirrels weren't there. But they would fly in there and they would just stomp around in the nest. Just boom, boom, And so I go to work one day with the carpenter guy working on this house. And it's in a residential neighborhood. Nowhere around a chicken factory. Not really around some woods. It's kind of rural, but not. It wasn't around like a huge forest. And these hawks picked the one oak tree on side the house that was really it wasn't the only spot in the neighborhood. There were far bigger trees and far safer places away from human beings. And it picked a bush oak, which is pretty low to the ground. Now I'm up on a ladder. It's a gable-to-gable roof, and I'm painting on the side of the house, trying to get it all caulked up and everything and ready to sell. And these hawks come over there and they land in that tree, and they are so close, and it's two of them, and they're feeding. They're eating stuff, like ripping rodents apart and stuff. And I'm talking with my boss and that other coworker about it, and I'm just like, man, I've never seen a hawk just fly up and just sit there like that. Like, they don't hang out this close, And they're like, I don't know, that's crazy. I thought it was feeding young. I thought it had a nest in the tree. It was so close to me, and that it was trying to protect them. And the more we studied it, like, there was no net, like, there was no reason for them to be there. Maybe all this really did. I don't have an answer for this, but to bring attention to it, to say, study the birds as they study you. I notice when I wake up every morning, even before I roll over, it's as if when I consciously open my eyes and I'm awake in the morning, they start. It doesn't matter if it's a crow, if it's a different kind of bird, they squeak immediately, as if they could see through the wall. Like, every morning. There are birds don't wake me up. It's I wake up and then they tweet, like they're announcing it. And some mornings there's just so many here in this yard. Now, as you can tell, I do live in a rural, very, very very close to the woods area now. But there's so many. I mean, it's beautiful. I'm not saying that it's always like. And, I don't know what any of this means. I would think that maybe the predatory ones, because I was around predator-like people at the time, and spiritually. And please understand when I'm talking about the people that I worked with and the people that I lived with. Very spiritually predator-like. They were trying to do something for my destruction. But these other birds were around. I'll put the picture up of the two birds sleeping together on that porch. But that's a completely different time. Those just came to hang out and slept there a lot. Maybe I was always being watched. Maybe that's what they are. I don't know. I know this has been all over the place today. Sometimes I get to watching stuff and I get to thinking, and I'm like, man, I got to talk about this. And as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, man, that would be such a great thing to talk about, and it all kind of gets jumbled up. But I don't know. I just think about all these things. Sorry I was all over the place, but I'm gonna just keep continuing to do what God places in my heart and pray about it, and I guess He's still working through me, even if it doesn't make sense to you. Maybe it will later. The moon. A YouTube channel reported on the two different moons today. I was watching it. Yesterday was the wolf moon, the brightest moon, all that, and it happened to be on January 1st, and then on the 31st there's another blood moon, and they call it a lunar eclipse. And I don't know why I didn't pick this up in 2015, but I remember as a child the eclipses when the sun was around the earth, according to the heliocentric. I'm not getting into that in this video. Let's just do the heliocentric, what most people believe. When the sun is around the earth and the moon's on the other side. When I was a kid, it was like it was whenever, not a new moon? Is that a new moon? When it's just completely blacked out, like when there was no moon in the sky. Like, that was it. There was no red moon. I remember, and I used to pay attention, like I had a telescope and all that. I paid attention to the sky a lot. Probably to the best of my ability as a child, but it was just different. Now, every time that there's a lunar eclipse, it apparently turns into a red moon. And I don't believe that the model that we've been taught over and over and over in life is the way that it is, but that's research you're gonna have to do on your own. That's I just know that we've been lied to. At least, regardless of what shape you think the world is, can we at least agree that if you actually look into it, you can see clearly that there is a huge lie about the things that we've did and the way that everything works, that we haven't been to the moon, and they're just not doing the things that they've said that they've done or are currently doing. That it's just, there's way too many holes in it, and there's way too much CGI and the bubbles coming out of spacesuits and all that, where you can clearly see that they're in a pool. I've been so all over the place today. So there's a video that I saw the other day by a guy named NoblenessDee. He's generally in the Mandela affected community of some heavy, some names that I know that are quite popular. But I'm gonna leave a link to this video in the description, and in there you'll see that the marshland around New York, how there's some anomalies in there, how they're man-made looking. They don't look like they're made by nature. They're not indigenous to the land, and that the point that I'm trying to get at, and I know this sounds crazy, we're being taught over and over that the world is being overpopulated, that it keeps growing and growing and growing. However, I specifically remember, because I'm from Louisiana, looking up what the population of New York was and thinking how crazy it was that it was at 44 million. Like, how many people is that? There's only 22 million people in the whole state of Louisiana. And just in the city of New York, it was 44 million. Well, now it's like 19. It's way lower. And when you look at this video and you see how the land is being eroded away, and yet it's as if it wasn't always marshland, that it looks like, you really just go check it out. It looks like there could have used to have been like a neighborhood there, like something else there, and the city's actually getting smaller, and it's that way, nationwide. And the whole thing about how the Gulf of Mexico is shrinking, and it looks like is like a dying flower, and I think that if I'm not unique to any of this, then neither is New York. It's happening all over the place. I don't understand why some places are dying and some are growing. The land mass is changing and becoming like healthier. I don't it's just it's getting more of it. Again, it's with that separation of the people, and then work on those ones, and then it's as if that part of the world disappears so that it becomes more for those of the serpent seed. That's just speculation, but after watching that video and applying it to my life and all the different experiences that I've been through, that's the first conclusion that comes to my mind. It's completely amazing how the land masses have changed and how restricted I am, and that I'm basically stuck here. Please go check that out, and hopefully it'll put you in the same frame of mind that it put me, because we're under attack more than we realize. It's spiritually, but it manifests physically after their spiritual victory. One thing I forgot to mention, and I didn't feel like crawling in on the other side. I know I keep talking about this Madeline person a lot. I have no physical proof whatsoever that I'm going to meet her, but I know that I got that message from God. I absolutely believe it. I also believe in the as a man thinketh, but I believed in it long before I didn't believe that I know that it came from him. It's another one of the things that the way he placed it on my heart, there's no way that I'm not even as creative as if I gave you all the details. There's just no way that I could have placed that together. And in such a state of despair whenever it was revealed to me, how it was revealed to me, and all this and that. But the only reason I'm mentioning this again is because I don't know when I'm gonna meet her, and that's not important. I'll meet her exactly when I'm supposed to, but I'm afraid that I'll forget to mention that whenever I do meet her, I know everything speeds up after that, because since day one, he told me that it becomes very, I don't know, something changes, and everything becomes very, very rapid after that, for good or for worse. I don't know, but again, if he told me that when I start working, I'm not going to stop, and when all this stuff comes to a head, and the changes that we see around us, I don't know where I'm gonna be, and I'm not worried about it, because I know that my Father will be there with me. But I'm just saying, if I pop up on a video and I'm like, guess what her name is? Guess what? And you don't see me for a while after that for whatever reason, I don't know. I know everything speeds up after that, and I was afraid that I was gonna forget to mention it, if I do meet her like tomorrow or something. So anyway, God bless. Have a good day.
Desperate for changing, starving for truth. I'm closer to where I started, chasing after you.